So the first thing is that what is exactly the problem? Let's first try to identify the problem. The sample design, collecting of data, analyzing of data, and then writing of the report altogether. It is not that only we have started up with this problem orientation or research, but there are hundreds and thousands of people who have already done research here. Because people might think that research is all about a theoretical process or only about a statistical process, but that is not true. Good morning and welcome to the session 4 in Unit 1 in Business Research Method, where we are talking about the research process, the steps involved in the research. Now, there are many steps involved in terms of identifying a research and coming out with the most accurate answer. So let's go further and try to understand how the research methodology is to be designed. The first thing is that all research endeavor share a common goal of furthering our understanding of the problem and travels through the basic stages, forming a basic research process. So the ideology of research is to know more and know better. So when we have come across a problem and when we want to solve it using a research methodology, our ideology, our thinking needs to be in the same lines where we want to actually enhance our knowledge, make it stronger and make it better for the coming years to go. So that is why we try to come into this research methodology, the research process. Now what we want to do here is that an understanding of the research process is needed necessarily to effectively carry out the research and sequencing stages. Now this is going to be very easy one, which is a very inherent process altogether. Now why we mean to say this is that when we start studying about research, we need to understand what are the nuances that are involved in terms of the research, in terms of the methodology altogether. Because people might think that research is all about a theoretical process or only about a statistical process, but that is not true. We need to understand the process. We need to understand each and every step that is involved in terms of building up the research. So that is why I would always say that research methodology, the research process itself requires a great amount of thinking, requires a great amount of understanding, and we need to take it stage by stage in order to achieve the results as far as possible. Now, the second thing is that what are the stages that we are going to undergo? The first one is identifying the problem. The second stage is reviewing the literature. The third stage is setting up the research questions, choosing the study design, deciding on the sample design, collecting data, processing, analyzing data, and writing of the report. Now look at the steps altogether. It's so well defined for us that it is so, it's very easy for us, and at the same time, it would help us in terms of achieving the objective that we want. The first thing, it helps us to identify the problem. The first thing is that we need to find out the problem. We need to find the literature that is associated, the works that have been already done. We will set up the research question and hypothesis. We will also choose the study design, the sample design, collecting of data, analyzing of data, and then writing of the report altogether. Followed by, we are now going to go into a very important thought process called as the identifying the problem. Now, how does a researcher will actually identify a problem? Is it that anything that comes across as a challenge is a problem? Or is there a specific methodology for all of us to understand the problem? Why I'm trying to say this is that there is a lot of ifs and buts that are involved in terms of understanding a problem. We might think that a problem is something that necessarily forms a challenge, or we might think that a problem is something where we have to involve with certain thought process. But that is not always true. A well-defined problem will lead the researcher to accomplish all the important phases of process. So unless and until your problem is structured, well-defined, clearly put across in terms of print, in terms of the thought evaluation, you will not be able to solve this issue, or you will not be able to go further in terms of the research. So the first thing is that what is exactly the problem? Let's first try to identify the problem. Why? Because the problem is again many ways. It is process related, or is it people related? Is it technology related? Is it market related, growth related? So one has to start looking for the problem in all possible aspects, in all possible manners altogether. Then only you will be able to achieve the correct objective for your research. And this is very, very important for the researcher. Then only he will be able to take the research forward to the next level, followed by reviewing the literature, which is very, very important. It is not that only we have started up with this problem orientation or research, but there are hundreds and thousands of people who have already done research here. And all these people would have also created their work. They would have also written a lot of theses and documents about it. So when we talk about the literature review, it is all about going through the similar kind of work which has been done at major levels altogether. Most of these people have also identified and understood this factor clearly, that if you want to go through a particular research knowledge, if you want to go through a particular set of system, you need to go through the previous work that has been done. That can be a first-hand work, or that can be a published data, or that can be a secondary journal or data that's available in some part of this work. But whenever we go through that work, we will try to understand, we will try to get the flow of the research altogether. Now, using the literature review only, we will be able to understand the gaps that has happened in the previous literature. And the most important thing is that when you go through the research area, the literature part, you will be able to theoretically understand the amount of effort that has gone in terms of addressing the various issues, and you will also get a wider perspective of knowledge about the same problem that is existing. Now, the next step, we will be trying to understand setting up of the research question and the hypothesis. Now, an objective will be precisely say what should be research and how it needs to be researched, what are the kind of information to be collected, how to provide a framework, and then go into the hypothesis angle altogether. So from the literature review, once we have identified the gap, we will start coming into the position of setting up the objectives of the research. The objectives of the research will actually help us to frame and go for the scope of the study. The best expression of research objective is well formulated and testable research hypothesis. So it is going on. In terms when you understand how things have been built, how things have been dedicated altogether, in terms of understanding the objectives, in terms of understanding the entire perspective. Sometimes you would start understanding here is that it is an objective is the exact thing that the researcher wants to tell in one line. His objective is the direct reflection of the outcome that we are speaking about. So always, without the objective, you will not be able to frame a very good thesis altogether. So objectives will play a very, very important role in terms of getting onto the research. Now, what is an hypothesis? An hypothesis is an unproven statement or a proposition that can be refuted, supported with empirical data to have research question. Hypothesis itself means that it is not yet proven. It's an assumption. It's a thought that we try to challenge ourselves by saying that either of one is possible. Now, if I say, for example, the sky is always blue in color. Now, this can be questioned again by saying that, is it that always the sky is blue in color, or it is permanently blue in color? So there are different opinions that will come inside. So similarly, in hypothesis, we are assuming and framing certain things which can be challenged and which can be found out, which can be questioned on the other way around, where we can say that either it can be on this side or it can be on the other side altogether. So that's why it is very, very important for all of us to understand the hypothetical factors. Now, the next thing that we are going to study here is choosing the study design. What is going to be the study methodology, the study objective altogether? The research design is a blueprint or framework fulfilling the objectives, answering the research question. So how is going to be the blueprint? How is going to be the ideology altogether? That one has to see. Because when I say about the blueprint, it's a fine work. I would say it's a fine print or it's a fine methodology here in terms of understanding what we are trying to write, what we are trying to predict altogether. Many a times we might find that the research is already there. We just have to put the lines, we just have to the font, the alignment, and then we are ready for printing up of the research. But the answer is no. Why? Because when we are going in for this particular step, the design of the study, one has to carefully set in the steps. What has to come first, what has to come second, how it needs to be built, what are the different factors. All these things have to be put in carefully, cleverly, in a step-by-step mode. Then only we will be able to understand the ideology, the fine print altogether. So that's why I would always say that this framework of understanding has to be set in, has to be built in, and then only we will be able to get a clear-cut picture of how to move further and how to take the business, the design altogether. Now, designing on the sampling size. Now, sampling is very, very important, and this is a very crucial step in the research methodology, in the research process altogether. Why? The basic idea of sampling is that it involves a procedure that has a relatively small number of items of the universe to conclude the whole population. Now, we take a sample out of a given population to understand the characteristic features, the different fragmentation, the different parts of how things are working actually. So many times the sampling is actually a kind of selection that the researcher has to do very, very carefully so that he is able to understand, he is able to take forward how things are moving, how things are actually getting built in for him. Many a times people might think that, okay, this is quite simple, we don't have to worry about it. We could just go back and write whatever that comes to the top of our mind, or we could just take up whatever that sample size is coming in. So we'll just put in a number and we get it. But that is not true. Why? Because if you want to get an accurate result, if you want to exactly understand the qualitative and quantitative factors, features of that particular research, you need to have a strong sampling that needs to be done, which can be taken so that you can conclude upon the research in a better manner, in a better aspect altogether. Followed by collection of data. How are you going to collect the data? The gathering of data may range from a simple observation to a large-scale survey in any of the defined population. There are many ways to collect data. So for us, the data collection is a step-by-step process where you will be able to collect data from a simple level to a large-scale level. So it involves a lot of process through which the entire data is collected and sent forward. The approach selected depends upon the objectivities of the studies, the research design, availability of time, money, and person. So whenever we get into research for a company standpoint, it again depends upon the time, money, energy, effort of the people who are involved. Now, if the company just wants to make a simple research, not spending too much of time and money, then they will not get into this kind of research. But if the company can afford time in terms of building up a large-scale research, then automatically they will go in for a larger data process selection and different methodology. So with the variation that we are going to see in the type of data, the data collection method will also differ and will also have a different emphasis or impact on the research. But Altogether, the data collection method is very, very important because that is going to be the crucial evidence for the research that you have undertaken. Now, the processing part of is and analyzing. So once the data is there in your hand, the data processing begins with editing and coding of data. You try to segregate the data, you try to put it under respective columns and subheading, you try to look into who are the people, what are the different things. So you are going to analyze, you're going to clarify yourself, you are going to get completely convinced by the factor that every single data that is being taken is of the correct aspect, correct length, magnitude, and finally we will do the editing and eligibility to find out whether data is correct, how the data has been done, what are all the different factors, is the responses matching according to our need. With all this thing coming into picture, then only we will be able to process and analyze the data. Now, the next thing is that the writing of the report, the entire task of research study is accumulated in writing a document called as the proposal. So proposal forms a very, very important stage. Now, a research proposal is like a work plan or a prospectus, an outline which is going to tell to the people and to the organization in the world what is the individual researcher has done in order to bring in a qualitative study of what has happened in the last particular time period. And he is also going to provide a potential service to his client or a sponsor by bringing his qualitative research. The proposal will be prepared by keeping in view the sequence presented in the research process, because it's going to tell what, how, where, and whom it will be done. So it's going to give a complete step-by-step analysis of how it is being done, using what methodology, what techniques, and for whom it is going to be addressed. With this, I come to the end of this particular session. I hope and believe that this session was of a great use and of a resource to you. In the upcoming session, we will be studying more about the different formulation stages in terms of the business research methodology. Until then, stay tuned, stay blessed, and stay enlightened forever. Thank you once again for joining me today on this wonderful session.